Hello, today I'd like to talk to you about playing white against the Dutch defence. I've played the Dutch defence myself and I got a lot of respect and time for it. It's clearly another unbalanced sort of approach where black's not trying to even things up in the middle. They're saying, all right, well you have your share of the centre, but I want to start looking at the king side. And I've been trying to look for some systems with bishop to f4 as usual, and it doesn't fit ever so well with the main lines of the Dutch. If you're going to put a pawn on f5, as in the Dutch defence, then the bishop on c8 goes to sleep. So the best square for the bishop on c8 is b7. So black will want to play b6. And so the move that white usually chooses on move 2 is, wait for it, g3. And that stops black developing their bishop in the way that they like. And now the bishop f4 move may not work so well. Black is likely to want to play d6 and e5 when the bishop's just in the way. Bishop on f4 works quite well if black is going to play a move like d5, and then obviously you've got nice control of some of the dark squares. But well, let's have a look at some lines. The line I'm going to recommend against the Dutch defence is to play knight to c3. A guy called Stefan Peterson once wrote a book on the Dutch from black's point of view, and he says the most annoying system to play against the Dutch is knight to c3, so that's a good recommendation. And now the way that we used to think about it is knight f6 and bishop to g5, and if if black plays any sort of normal move, we're going to take on on f6, and then would black capture? I guess black would capture with the e pawn to keep the h pawn from getting lost and to allow themselves to develop the bishop. And now black's got sort of slightly messy pawns and also pawns that aren't able to advance very easily. So white's got sort of nice easy development and so on. And this position was thought to be quite uncomfortable for black. And so to stop black playing like that, white playing like that, instead of playing knight to f6, black would play d5. And now there was some old analysis that I remember from a book by Andrew Martin many years ago, which I don't have anymore, so I'm trying to just to remember this. But I think the idea was, well, white can play a gambit, play e4, and if f takes e4, then queen h5 check, and queen takes d5, and black's in a real mess. So don't do that. And if d takes e4, well, now white can play f3 and play this as a different sort of gambit. One of the problems with this position for white might be that black could just equalise by playing e5, just giving the pawn straight back, as is often recommended. And if the queens come off, there's not much of a gambit anymore, and black should be able to equalise. So instead of playing f3 on move 4, white can play bishop to f4. Hurrah! So we've got our bishop f4 system, and this may be one that you could play. One line may go f3, and now obviously if black takes on f3, then white's got a great position. So e6 is the strongest line, trying to keep the e4 pawn there as long as possible and be annoying for as long as possible, so white can't develop their knight on f3 as they'd want to. So instead, we take bishop to c4, knight on g to e2, which is a less gambity sort of square, isn't it? So you're not developing as far forward and as fast as you'd like to. This position, I guess, is about equal. White's got some compensation for the pawn. Black's got some awkwardness, and actually, given how badly most people defend at club level, I imagine if you just played this as aggressively as you could with white, you may just walk through. I mean, here's a little example: knight to d5, takes. We don't want too many swaps if we've got a gambit pawn down. So we've got good control of dark squares now. I doubt that black was wise to swap the dark squared bishop off so soon. Steps out of the pins, hangs onto the e4 pawn. Rook a1, trying to get it back, and now takes on f6, takes on f6, bishop to b3. Still not getting our pawn back, but advancing in the centre now, and queen to g5, making a bit more aggro on one side, and having feinted towards the king side, we will move on the queen side, opening up the line for the bishop, and knight to f5, sneaky, hits the queen and the g7 point, and just wins straight away. So that's the sort of game I guess we had in mind. That's a game between I'm not going to be able to pronounce these very well, Kurgovic and Smilkovic from 2004. So that's one bishop f4 idea. I think that's not much better than equal. I mean, if you like gambits, go for it. But I think, in fact, after d5, just bishop f4, and we can play this and just say, well, we've got our pieces on nice squares. There's no need to go for a gambit line. The control of the dark squares is really rather good here. Black. Both sides are struggling to think of a way to opening up lines at the moment. So the rooks in the corners are all probably pulling sad faces. So white takes the chance to play c4, and now there's going to be an open line. It's chased back, and now this sort of stonewall position with a bishop on f4 is quite good for white. I mean, you can play this with a if you get into this through a different move order, an early g4 is very good for white, and black may struggle to hold the game, but white plays more calmly in this position, and now takes control of some more dark squares, again using the dark squares with knight e5, looking at the queen side where we've got more space. Takes, and now having got most of the pieces in okay positions, white opens up a file for the rook, and with an open f file and control of the dark squares, bishop d6, white stands very well here, and rook to h3 moves across to the king side, and I wonder if you can see how to finish this off. Rook takes f6 is the killer move, and now rook to g3, and black's got no real way of holding this position with queen to g6 in the post. So that's not all forced. That's Babula Solinar from 2017, but that's another approach. So you've got the gambit line with bishop to f4, or you can just play bishop to f4 immediately. One last idea in the Dutch, black doesn't always play f5 straight away. They might play e6 first, and if we play knight f3, maybe hoping for d5. Well, d5 you play the queen's gambit, knight f3, c4 is our queen's Indian and Bogo Indian. But after knight f3, f5, and we're in a different sort of Dutch position, where bishop to g5 here is just going to mean a swap of bishops, and bishop to f4 I suspect is going to invite d6 and e5 at some point, and not so effective unless the black d pawn has already come to d5. But there's another idea here which I rather like for white. It's not playing for a big advantage, but again you don't always get those in the opening. We're going to play d5. There's a sort of an idea which I expect black will know, although they may not, which is if you take on d5, white takes on d5 with the queen, and now white is threatening the f pawn. After d6, knight to g5 here is quite fun, clearly threatening a mate on f7, and if the queen comes to e7 to look after f7 square, then we can play knight takes h7, and because of rook takes h7 and queen takes g8, this is rather nice for white, nice balanced position, and so on. So that's the sort of idea that white has in mind. So this knight g5 idea is quite cheerful. Knight h6 I don't think is very pretty for black, and white usually does very well out of these positions. So black players these days tend not to take on d5. They would play something like maybe bishop to d6 is a move I've seen recommended. Odd looking move, but the idea is to play e5 if they can. So perhaps knight to c3 is an idea, and we'll take on e6 and play e4 and knight to g5. So we've got black can play e5 if they like, but they're going to end up with a weak isolated e pawn, and white's just got a small advantage here, which could turn into a nasty kingside attack. So that's a nice line for white. Knight to f6 is a very more sensible looking idea, which I expect your opponents are more likely to play unless they know this line. Again, just takes, and knight c3, and again you might want to be playing e4 in this position, and if black lets you. Otherwise, again, I think you just got a nicer position here for white. After knight to c3, then the black e pawn is backward and doesn't look as though they're going to advance to forward anytime soon. So this is a position with a backward black e pawn, and I think this is quite okay for white. So that's a little sideline to play against the e6 move order in the Dutch defence. One more idea, if you're a bit gambit mad, is to play h3 here, with the idea of playing g4. But that's not an easy position for either side. You can look that one up if you like as a secret weapon. So anyhow, that's white against the Dutch. Hope you're getting all right against it.